right. Well, thank you for everyone for coming to our first virtual panel of the conference. It's been a really wonderful day. We got to see some in-person work. We had snacks, there's swags. There are these really awesome tote bags that just came in yesterday. So if you want to come by tomorrow, we'll still have everything in the RLP building. I'm going to put it in the chat. We'll be in RLP 1.103. Do it 101 302 302 302 C MB. MB is where we'll have the presentations, but 3 is where the tote bags and the snacks are. So yes, we are here with 2 panelists, and I'm going to introduce myself, and then we'll have the panelists introduce themselves and give their presentation for 15 minutes. And then also the we'll have Q&A at the end. So yes, so who would like to go first?
I can go, if that's okay with Jessica.
Sure. Yeah.
I'm assuming because we're both. All right, let me, I guess, share my screen. I'll time myself, so I hate when I go over and I tend to ramble, so I promise to cut myself off at the 15-minute. I know you guys have had a long day. Okay, can you make me a co-host? For some reason, it's saying I'm not able to yet. Okay, thank you so much. Okay, just to begin, hi everyone, my name is Dominica Whitesell, and I'm a graduate student in the geography department here at UT. I really wish I could be here with you all today. I'm so sorry to be missing out on all the fun. My talk is entitled, It All Falls on Me, Hustling, Investment, and Care in Kampala, Uganda. Just a quick note to preface. This work comes out of my broader doctoral project. It's very incomplete. And in this project, I examine the gendered and colonial dimensions of neoliberal urban development via the secondhand clothing industry in Kampala, Uganda. I appreciate any and all feedback, as I'm still in the very early stages of preparing this specific chapter. Thank you. Okay, and a quick nod to the feminist ethos central to my work and practice. I want to not only introduce myself, but acknowledge my larger feminist community without whom this work would not be possible. At UT, this includes my close advisor, who some of you may know, Dr. Caroline Clea, Dr. Brenda Binabana, and the Feminist Geography Collective. And at Makerere University in Kampala, this includes Jasper Nkunda, Fiona Tumwaze, Casper Burunji, and Joba Katushabe, who've really helped me imagine and carry out this project, and who will serve as my co-authors when I translate this work for journal publication. I also want to recognize just really quickly how my positionality, of course, deeply impacts my research and my research process in more ways than I can fully develop here. It's something that I take seriously and continuously reflect on, where I try to navigate this by insisting the partiality and co-creation of this work and by grounding my research and the testimonies of the participants we spoke with, but also in the conversations and the discussions amongst the research team. Okay, to begin, I would like to start by introducing Aziza, who's in the center here. Leaving her home most mornings at 4:30 and not returning before 8 at night, Aziza sells secondhand bed sheets, pillowcases, and bedding accessories in the large Owino market in Kampala's busy downtown. Joking that, quote, sleep with clothing bales, end quote. She stresses the hard work and perseverance necessary to be successful here. And successful she has been. In her 12 years, she has managed to be the main provider for her 4 kids and mother, paying their way through higher education and ensuring they receive all the medical and health care necessary. She attributes her success to the broader community and vendors, her friends, neighbors, everyone she works with, as they work together to invest and mediate risk and loss. currently serving as the vice chairperson for her market section and leading a savings group with 20 other vendors. She stresses that for her and for many, the market is, quote, our survival. So many women get their income from secondhand clothes. We support our kids, our relatives, and get our basic needs by selling those secondhand clothes. In this talk, I center the lives of women traders working in Kampala, Uganda, in the busy downtown market spaces and their creative and collaborative business strategies, the broader networks of family, friends, and other dependents they support through their labor there. Via their testimonies, I just highlight how, despite violent colonial capitalist histories and long-standing disenfranchisement, women, their labor, and their sustained investments in the city are not only incredibly valuable, but structurally integral to the national economy and the financing of city futures. To do so, I build on the vibrant body of work around hustling, extending it specifically via a feminist economic geography perspectives, specifically those informed by African feminists and social reproduction theory. I argue that doing so reveals the often overlooked yet deeply foundational value of and labor of care, and instead positions it as essential to getting by in the city. So hustling not only encompasses many of the paradoxes of life in African cities today, but also opens up alternative ways of understanding urban economic practice and of reading African cityscapes. This is a quote by Thiem et al. In their 2021 article. So broadly, work on the hustle economy, theorize hustling as, quote, an everyday agentic struggle to navigate precarious urban environments and advance their own, sometimes individual, sometimes shared, interests against the odds. Here, hustling encompasses an assemblage of everyday structures, dealings, and opportunities practiced in the absence of formal institutional support of any kind, end quote. So distinct from, yet very much in the line of work on formal economies and informal labor, this literature has documented the rise of diverse, alternative, and resilient labor strategies in the wake of neoliberal development and the increasingly challenging economic conditions across global South cities. Grounded in the experiences and the vernacular of marginalized youth, specifically African men, and informed by post-colonial and racial capitalism theory, work on hustling complicates understandings of parity, highlighting the creative, constant, urgent, and strategies to get by. I find this literature to be deeply generative for my project, yet I seek to extend it by putting it into conversation with feminist economic geography, specifically African feminist literature. So as Mary Kinyanjui writes, women encounter the reality of African city as it is presented in both theory and practice in their everyday livelihood negotiation. So building on broader feminist interventions to complicate understandings of labor by revealing and attending to the labor of social reproduction and the importance and often ignored domestic and care work done by women, Kinyanjui calls for more examining of African women's everyday economic negotiations and strategic moves. I argue that this pairing is particularly generative because, one, it forces us to think about Africans' lives and experiences, where, as I said, most work on hustling generally centers on masculinity. Two, but also to the distinct gendered dimensions of hustling, to the labor of motherhood and care as it informs and takes this literature in new directions. Okay, so key concern to contemporary city development plans is Kampala's downtown and the long-standing and incredibly lucrative markets such as Owino, Nakasero, and Usafi, and the mainly female vendors who sell foodstuffs, secondhand clothing, and various goods located here. Framed as both untapped and potentially lucrative source of taxation and revenue, but also as backwards, antiquated, and in contrast with the city's aspirational urban development, markets and the thousands of vendors they employ are marked by longer colonial, capitalist, and gendered histories of devaluation and disenfranchisement. So as Monteith 2019 and Davis 2000 made clear, under the British colonial administration, African women were specifically banned from working in any capacity within city limits. Women traders were prime targets of colonial reproval because their independence and economic capacity were positioned as a threat not only to Christian moral values, but also to competing colonial businesses. So though explicitly banned from city markets, African women, many of them single, dominated numerous indigenous markets around Kampala's periphery, establishing their own vibrant businesses. As such, colonial planners largely condemned these markets, with women traders demonized and often accused of sexual deviancy and prostitution. Right? Markets and their traders continue to be central to development discourse and routinely chastised for their low income and informal positioning. Ignoring such longer histories of precarity, which have disenfranchised many and produced such spaces, right? Government officials and speeches and development plans argue for the immediate redevelopment and formalization of such market spaces in order to facilitate more modern, beautiful city futures. And you can kind of see this in the images where they contrast the Western downtown versus, or the Western area from the downtown area. Okay, so made up of primarily low-income women, mostly single mothers, many widows, markets have been and continue to be crucial for those with little capital, resources, formal support to build a livelihood and provide for their families in an increasingly challenging urban climate. As Aziza notes, this market is, quote, like a mother to many, unquote, stating that with even the smallest amount of capital a woman can get her start here, quote, stall to stall, they can come and pick from me. They go to another person, they pick, they get some. That's why so many women come here, end quote. As she states here, women will work in a more informal capacity within the market, eventually raising enough capital to rent a stall. Indeed, these markets play a crucial role for low income earners, with many traders noting that the number of people entering the markets has dramatically increased in the past 5 years. As Brenda shared, quote, because we have few jobs here, job seekers, there are very many people, they're coming downtown so that they can start something to come up, unquote. Though many men work and sell in the markets and hold leadership roles within market groups, markets are distinctly gendered and shaped by gendered power in a variety of ways. As I said earlier, women make up the majority of vendors selling and working in various informal capacities within most of the downtown markets. For example, when asked about the gendered makeup of the market, Jane laughed a bit, exasperated, saying, quote, yes, we are mostly women because we're the ones with the responsibilities. We are the ones who do everything. Husbands abandoned us, end quote. It was commonly brought up that markets were predominantly made up of single mothers, driven by their determination to provide for their children. Janet added, end quote, women are the ones who care a lot to work. Women are running from home to come here and look for survival, end quote. And of course, this is not to negate, right, the many present fathers and the ways in which young men are also extremely disenfranchised under neoliberal urban development. Rather, a feminist approach to hustling makes clear the operations of gender and how care and gendered understandings of responsibility and respectability shape women's labor and opportunity in the city. As Daily Monitor reporter, Daily Monitor is a very popular newspaper in Kampala, Onyango Obo wrote in 2018, single mothers tend to be the ultimate hustlers. And in Uganda, some reports indicate that they are the backbone of the small scale business sector. Evident in Aziza's testimony, in spite of such disenfranchisement and their low income and gendered status, Kampala's markets, their centrality and the commerce that happens there is deeply lucrative to the city and national government. As these figures show, those surely underestimated and underreported, the commerce happening within Kampala's downtown greatly contributes to the national trade and GDP outputs. Markets in particular are international sites attracting thousands of consumers daily. As traders were quick to point out, Owino and other downtown markets are some of the largest in East Africa. Brenda noted the dynamic and far-reaching scope of her consumers, stating people come from villages, people come from far places, right? We have people coming from Kenya, people from Rwanda, even in Burundi we have them, even in the Congo. Right? And they point to also their success in caring for their extended families. As Janet noted, I take care of like 8 different people. I have 3 grandchildren, my brother and my own children. One is now 16 years and the other grandchildren's I have around. I built my own house. I'm taking care of my family and paying school fees. Teddy noted, I joined selling secondhand clothing because my husband, the father of my children, had lost his life, yet I had the children. It was with limited capital, yet I succeeded in educating the children. When my husband died, the children were in schooling, and now they have all finished. I will not fail to appreciate this ability. Okay, so just as care drives many women's participation in market spaces, it is also central to their success there. As Aziza's testimony makes clear, success in the market is deeply collaborative and communal. As many traders stressed, mentorship is crucial to learning in this industry. Most, if not all, traders noted how they came here via the advice and help of friends who had already worked here or knew someone working there. Despite the market being extremely popular and the influx of new traders hoping to capitalize in this industry, Janet noted, there's no competition at all. We agree in everything that if one is not around, we can sell for them. And if one colleague doesn't have enough money to buy bales, we can raise the money for them, okay? And then if they get the money, they pay us back. It is so good because no one can be independent on their own. I cannot imagine working alone without these other traders. Aziza echoed this sentiment, stating, they're like a sister to you. You talk to them, they tell you their aspirations. You are like family, you get to know each other. They help me when money is not enough. I can get a bale of clothes and they pay later. They lend me money in case of a bad day when I've not sold. They give me money for transport and I pay later. So care in the communities women forge in the markets also serve as ways to find alternatives to predatory and or exclusive traditional banking systems. In lieu of taking out formal loans from banks, women form their own local investment groups. In an effort to save, build collective resilience, women forge their own investments. As Aziza notes, we are 20 people. When someone is breaking down, we have a way of helping her so she can come back. Okay, and Janet also echoed these sentiments, saying that she is in a group that for the past 5 years has been trying to raise money to import. Anyways, I've gone past my time, so I'm going to just stop there. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Okay, there we go.
Are missing
Sorry
our
about that.
panelists, so if you wanted to circle back to the rest of your presentation during the Q&A, I think that would be okay. But I will hand the mic over to Jess.
Thank you, Jackie. I'm gonna go ahead and get my tech set up while I'm working on that. Just want to say thanks so much to Lonnie and Brenda for all of your hard work getting this conference together. I've enjoyed seeing the little clips on Instagram, and thank you, Jackie, for doing that. Okay, let me see. I've got this screen. We're doing a 2-screen situation here, so we're trying to make sure that this is working. Oh no, hold on. What? Hold on. System preferences. Yes, screen recording is okay. Sorry, y'all. My laptop literally died last week. So I'm on a new laptop, and apparently the permissions did not work. Is it okay if I quit and hop back in? Otherwise, I'm not going to be able to share my screen.
Yes. And
Okay.
also I'll put the 2-minute warning in the chat.
Love it. Okay, I will be right back in this Zoom.
So I'm so sorry about going over. My phone that I put the timer on kept going blank and I couldn't see it. And I tried opening it a few times and I did not see the chat. So sorry about that again.
That's okay. I should have said something at the beginning, but we've just been having so many things happen today. Just so it's end of day. I'm a little fatigued. So not everything is coming to me as easily. But we had a really lovely keynote. We put some of the videos of that on Instagram. Yes, just
They're on Instagram, you said, or?
yes, we put some like parts of the
Yes.
keynote on Instagram.
It's so exciting.
Okay, hi y'all. Gonna see if this worked. I really hope it did. Okay, let's try this again. Share screen. Okay, can y'all see my screen? Woohoo! All right. Thanks so much for your patience with that, everyone. Hi, my name is Jessica Olson. The correct pronouns for me are she, her. I'm a third-year dual degree, getting a Master's of Public Affairs from the LBJ School and my MA from the Center for Women and Gender Studies here at UT. And today I'll be presenting on my thesis, which is tentatively titled Manufactured Vulnerability, Queer and Disabled Feminist Critiques of Climate Injustices. And I want to do just a quick description of what I look like for any blind or visually impaired folks who will be joining us. I'm a white woman with dirty blonde hair that is increasingly graying, wearing a navy blue oversized shirt with sparkly plastic Monstera leaf earrings with my background blurred. And like Damiana before, or Dominica before I jump in, I want to just quickly talk about positionality. I'm a white settler in the United States. I am a cis woman. I'm queer and a disabled feminist who lives with different experiences of chronic illness. I'm also an activist in multiple cross-border, transnational, intergenerational feminist and climate justice spaces that are primarily oriented around putting pressure on the global climate regime, which is the United Nations climate negotiations. And I've been involved with local, national, international climate activism for more than a decade, and have worked at the nexus of building care in our movements, but also pushing for policy change that will halt climate's worst impacts, support climate migrants, and have rich historically emitting countries pay climate reparations. And so a lot of the work that I've built into my thesis is from my own embodiment in these spaces, but also from my friends and comrades who I've done this work alongside for so many years. So I'm very grateful to them and to that experience. So just diving in here, giving a bit of context, an important thing to note about climate change is that it doesn't actually discriminate when it comes to how its devastation falls, but social, economic, and political systems that determine our responses and response measures do. So for every trans person that's denied shelter or aid following a disaster, for every disabled person that's left behind during disaster evacuations, for every Black and Brown family who's sick from refinery pollution, and every missing and murdered Indigenous woman or girl near fossil fuel extraction sites, that's a very clear failure of the existing West culture of individualism, our capitalistic economic systems in neoliberal political fora. And it's just widely accepted that climate change most violent impacts are disproportionately felt by folks living at the margins, such as the folks I just mentioned. And while existing research frequently, cites like women are the most vulnerable to the effects of climate change as a result of social roles, responsibilities, and existing inequalities, a lot of this research really doesn't touch on race, class, disability, or queerness, and those are really missing from these analyses. So my thesis really interrogates the question of what vulnerability means and how it functions within climate change rhetoric, as what I'm seeing as a mechanism to excuse inaction, which then in turn makes disabled people what Dr. Julia Whitesell has termed expected losses to the climate crisis. And it's increasingly strong in frequent disasters. So I focus on feminist climate interventions and employ both crip and queer theories, and argue that political and movement rhetoric depoliticizes structural injustices that are further exacerbated by climate change, but also invalidates queer and disabled folks and make them expected losses, like Belser says. But also I want to say and argue about how this rhetoric also invalidates queer and disabled folks' experiences as brilliant activists who have the solutions to this crisis by placing them in the positions of being victims and victimized. So central to my argument is this assertion that the assignment of vulnerable to specific populations is in itself a political act. My work puts theory, lived experience, and political interventions into conversation while asking how to contend with the ways that vulnerability discourse may inadvertently or intentionally make people become expected losses, and to argue that disabled and queer folks are not passive victims of climate chaos, but actively involved in world building that can avert climate crisis and create more just systems. So to give y'all a brief overview for today, I'm going to talk about how and why I'm using feminist, crip, and queer theories to support this work, give you an overview of different models of disability, talk about why nobody or nobody should be an expected loss to climate crisis, define the concepts of vulnerability and resilience, and give you a few examples of how this really shows up within the UN climate sphere, and talk about the futures that queer and crip folks are building. A light touch on that, unfortunately. So to start off, why I use feminist, queer, and crip theories. A large piece of this is that these are the folks who are really putting into question power and how power dynamics have really not only created the climate crisis, but further embed it within our different systems. I really appreciated this quote from Musa 2014, that is, what is required by feminist ecological analyses of climate change is a focus on critically analyzing the historical forces, the hierarchical power relations, and the value systems that have caused and are standing in the way of addressing the current predicament. Similarly, I wanted to make sure to pull in activist voices. So pulling from Sins Invalid, a disability justice performance project that centers people of color, queer, and non-binary and trans folks with disabilities. They say we are multiracial, we are survivors or attempted genocides, forced migrations, transatlantic slavery, ableism, historical trauma, and ongoing intersectional, institutional, and interpersonal oppression. All the brutal forces that have treated the people and the planet as disposable. And these frameworks really inform the way I think about what is missing in terms of the different theorizing, but also what is and isn't published when it comes to climate disability and queerness in particular, even within feminist publications themselves. In most of the available research and peer-reviewed literature in particular, it's really important to understand what different models of disability exist. And this is because, for the most part, in the literature that is available, you mostly see the medical model. So the medical model really focuses on disability as something that is inherent to a person. It is a defect. It is something that needs to be cured, and it is within the domain of healthcare and social service professionals, as opposed to what a lot of disabled folks themselves and ourselves really push towards, which is the social model, which is saying that these systems that have been created are in and of themselves disabling and create the inequalities. And it's not about curing our bodies, it's about making sure that we are able to actually exist in the worlds that we live in. And throwing in, which is also important for analysis, the political and relational model, which essentially says that disability is always going to be a political category. It's inherently tied to other identities and systems and forms of oppression. And what I really want to emphasize in bringing up these different models is that the way I have seen this show up within the literature, especially using the medical model, is that it really does kind of create this dynamic where a lot of folks doing climate work don't recognize disabled folks as people or as active participants, but as folks who are just kind of passively affected by climate change, or like Belcher said, expected losses, right? And so pulling from the feminist and disabled literature on climate change, I pulled 3 different really wonderful thinkers. Calgar et al. Talks about how folks with disabilities on whole experience higher levels of vulnerability to hazard-related risks than the general populace, but their vulnerability is socially constructed. While Belser goes in to say that disability demarcates those who will not and cannot be saved, and those expendable bodies sacrificed to the realities of a harsh new world. While Bell ties back towards this biomedical model, saying that vulnerability is often seen as this inevitable or natural consequence of life with impairment. And I think the interesting thing about all of these pieces is that they really touch on the disaster portion of the climate crisis, but that's not the entirety of what is happening, right? So when it comes to thinking about vulnerability, in my work, I really think about the ways that not only disasters and the systems around disaster risk reduction and responses has created unequal ability to be either rescued or survive. It's really about where throughout all of these different systems are folks increasingly doubly or triply marginalized in and outside of movements and policies. So in thinking about just what even is vulnerability, I pull a lot from, in my thesis, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, because they are what is seen as kind of this neutral authority on any sort of climate science, climate modeling, and they're the ones who come up with definitions that will end up being used within UN processes. So for them, vulnerability is defined as the propensity or predisposition to be adversely affected, and it encompasses a variety of concepts and elements, including sensitivity or susceptibility to harm and lack of capacity to cope and adapt. Whereas feminist scholars, such as Shannon Speed in her book about Indigenous women incarcerated in Texas, says vulnerability is not a condition of the women themselves, but rather a structural condition. The potential consequences of using the term, which could include interpreting vulnerability as an existential condition, might then even imply blaming women for the violence they experience, underestimating women's agency or taking the focus off of the perpetrators. And that is exactly the dynamic that I see in so much of the climate literature, is that folks, when they're talking about disability or even queerness, which is almost more invisibilized than disability within this literature, is that it places the kind of responsibility of vulnerability on the individual. It says you are inherently going to be impacted adversely. So we'll just label you as vulnerable and you fall into this kind of umbrella category of other folks who are vulnerable, as opposed to recognizing that even within the very structures that create the responses, folks are not only not involved, but not within the kind of codified elements of these policies. Another piece of terminology that's really important is, on the flip side of vulnerability, there's resilience. And the difficulty with resilience is that it's kind of become slightly more of this neoliberal idea where, as opposed to talking about the more systemic ways that someone or something or some system that they live within is resilient, it's fallen into, oh, you're so resilient, or talking about just building in these ideas that folks themselves must be the one to figure out how to survive, how to live, etc. The IPCC definition is not super different from the second one I have here by Movement Generation, which was a POC-led collective doing climate justice work in Oakland, California, and across the country. The biggest difference between this here is that they talk about the restoration of reflective response that is also in reciprocal relation to place. And I would talk more about resilience, but I'm running low on time, so I want to keep moving. Apologies. So the big case that I'm really interrogating is the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. And the reason why I reflect on this, there are many folks who would argue it's not the right place to look. And I argue it is, because even though it is this huge international system that is really kind of pie in the sky, huge goals, it is the way to make sure that most impacted communities have what they need to survive the crisis and to hold largest emitting nations accountable. But it's also the place where policy will then influence individual countries' action, what they do and don't do. So what happens, thank you, Jackie, at the UNFCCC determines what will happen at the local level. And the big issues when it comes to disability within this fora is that disability only shows up in the preamble of the one big policy that this process is following. And this preamble is not binding, and it only lists disability within kind of a laundry list of different identities that are vulnerable, nothing else. There's also an over-reliance on something called DALYs, which, if folks know, it's the disability adjusted life years, which essentially is an economic way to say that disabled folks' lives are actually worth less. So that in and of itself is really problematic. And also, as I mentioned earlier, really depends on the medical model. Further, there's no queer or disabled-led constituencies. And why this is important is because you do not have a voice in this process. You do not have the ability to influence these policies on a kind of taken note of for the public record scale unless you have an official constituency. The spaces themselves also tend to be really inaccessible, not only physically, where folks who either use wheelchairs or other mobility aids can't access the space, but the process itself is overwhelming. It is absolutely fast-paced. You get a lot of the kind of last-minute policy changes in ways that even folks who have English as a second language can't follow really well. And that's by design. But I'm almost out of time. So what I want to point into is that a really important piece here is that it's not just this policy process, it's also the activist within the space, where there's a lot of performativity, tokenism, and this really awful culture of burnout, where if you are not running on less than 1 hour of sleep and giving it your all, you are obviously not someone who cares. So even within our movements, we promote really strong ableism and exclude folks from the spaces where we're trying to make change. The next piece I'm really digging into in my thesis, and don't have much to say today, is that I'm proposing we shift from talking about climate justice from vulnerability and resilience to talking about mutuality and resistance. And a lot of that is going to be through imagining queer and crip futures, including art, activism, and care, with these fantastic examples that I recommend folks look into on their own. I think that is time, so I'll go ahead and wrap that there. Thank you all so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Well, if anyone has any questions, please unmute or pop them into the chat. I did want to ask both the participants about their graduate programs, because I think we just dove into the presentations, and Dominica, I really didn't catch your program. So if you want to reintroduce yourself and maybe go over some of the slides that you had to rush through at the end, this is a good time to do that.
Hello, I'm in the geography department, and I was just at the very end of my conclusion, but I think you guys heard enough. I was just going to, I think, regurgitate some of those points, and maybe. But yeah, I'm in geography, and there's more of a feminist community there now than a few years ago, so we're growing. Yeah, that's where I'm housed, but a lot of my work.
Who are you working with?
Dr. Caroline Faria and Dr. Brenda Bunabana, who's new to our department. So that's really, really exciting. You all get a chance to work with either of them. Incredible.
Yeah, I do have a question. Okay, yeah, there was a delay here. We're in the same room, Jackie, Lonnie, and I. But yeah, I do have a question to Dominica. I really liked your work and thinking about women's economic activity as a form of care was really like innovative for me. I even wrote what you said, like care drives women's participation in the markets. But I have one question. It's more like a curiosity. How do you think that hustling has been affected by the COVID-19? Because then the conditions of work were very different in Uganda, probably. And I was wondering how women's activity has been affected, if if they were affected at all by those new conditions that were imposed by the pandemic.
Thank you so much for this question. I really appreciate it because I didn't know whether to add this, and I'm kind of debating on whether including this in the chapter. Obviously, I already get a bit of scatterbrained. My writing reflects that, so it goes in too many directions. But during COVID, actually, a lot of the markets were asked to stay open because they supply so much food to the to the city and to the country, really. And so to enforce like social distancing, they were asked to sleep in the markets. And there were really high rates of transmission, and people talked about the lack of sanitation and bedding provided in a lot of cases, and women kind of came together and tried to make shift some of these systems. So that actually it played a huge role. And then other clothing vendors. Uganda was particularly hit by COVID, and because it also has a very strong military presence, it was able to completely shut down, with very, very strict enforcement. And so women, a lot of times were, women who sold secondhand clothing were imprisoned if they tried to go back to the market and retrieve any of their stock. So, and still they talk about how maybe that the closing of these markets and their disenfranchisement during that time will facilitate their removal from the city. So anyways, that's a very long answer, but yeah, that played a huge role. Please let me know if that should be a part of this, or if it's its own separate piece of that. But.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for saying all that. Yeah, it's awful, the fact that they became probably one of the most affected groups, or most susceptible to be infected with COVID because of politics of care and the inability of making money with outside of this system. Yeah, my second question is that you talked about how they're mostly single mothers or widows, and I was thinking if I just found it very interesting, this connection between motherhood and women's economic participation in Uganda, and I was wondering if this would change or shape care as a concept in your research, because we often think of care as something related to the reproductive economy, but not so much as integral to motherhood, in terms of who are they trying to care for and survive for.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so I originally went into a lot of these interviews not realizing the demographics. I knew it was mostly women from other interviews, but I was more focused on kind of examining. Originally I was interested in seeing how women in the markets were interested in fashion, and how dealing in secondhand clothes kind of led them, how that the tensions with the fashion industry And then in interviews, it commonly, when asking like, what success have you had, or what's a positive experience in the market, it was routinely like the pride they felt for able to put their kids through school, and the larger systems of like care and people they've supported. So care, and and then also when talking about what it took to be successful in the market, routinely it was talking about the networks of support. Right. So I thought it was really interesting the way that care was operating, and how it's kind of often left out of hustling literature, which is, I try to say it's fantastic doing this work on alternative engagements in the economy, but isn't kind of thinking through the care that feminists have long talked about, right? And social protection theory. I hope that kind of answers the question.
I think that kind of ties in a little bit to the keynote that we had. One of the things that Dr. Cardenas talked about were these pods of care, and also pods of accountability. If moving towards abolition, having some people that will also, that you can call if you've been harmed, but also people that you can call to hold you accountable if you have been harming other people. But I wanted to ask Jessica, if we're talking about networks of care or systems of care, what have you noticed? I know there's a lot of like social media activism for people who are like chronically ill and stuck at home, and they have like their support networks and stuff. But what other examples of like networks of care did you find in either disability studies or looking at environmental activism?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, for me also, like a big part of community care that shows up in climate spaces is really mutual aid and mutual aid efforts. And I think one of the clearest examples from, I would say most examples I read, is that, in this kind of individualization of resilience where disabled and chronically ill folks have to create their own disaster plans. A lot of that means creating a network of care where it's like, if I don't have power and you do, how do I get to you? Or if I need to evacuate, who can drive my van? Do I have access to, someone in my neighborhood who has all of these different resources, and just kind of essentially doing that mapping ahead of time. And so having that kind of like almost like a pod in a way really creates that aid in that way. And then there's also these really fantastic collectives, one of which I really enjoy and will draw off of in my thesis, which is Mask Oakland. It's a group who do mutual aid specifically for our unhoused neighbors, and also for chronically ill and disabled folks in the Bay Area who can't access N95 and other high quality respirators. And that started during the wildfires. So we, in those instances in the Bay, so the particulate matter in the air becomes so dense and so thick and so fine that it can actually cause really difficult respiratory issues for folks, especially who already have difficulties with breathing. So asthma, if you already have any sort of impairment to your lungs or other vascular systems, just puts a lot of stress on the body. And so Mask Oakland ensures that folks kind of sign up and are able to deliver or collect or buy masks and water. And that infrastructure was set in for climate resilience. But even then, during the COVID-19 pandemic, it became COVID response too. So it's even just those really beautiful mutual aid networks. They're kind of multi-purpose for many different disaster responses. And then honestly, just like thinking about communities of care within the monster that is the UN space, literally just like crying at the end of the day in a group of people, folks bringing extra food, because a lot of times the food inside of the conference center doesn't either you can't afford it, it's not great quality food, or it's not something that can meet any different dietary restrictions or needs. And so a lot of folks just kind of build it into a daily practice of showing up for each other in these different ways. So there are a few, but yeah, thanks for the question.
I also have a question for Jessica. How do you see your project building or generating conversation in countries where discussions about crip and queer are absolutely invisible? Like I would mention my country, Indonesia. We don't have any framework or accessibility or any kind of disabilities or something like that. So yeah, I hope you, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily have a plan because I don't quite see that as like my role or my place necessarily. But what I'm hoping from this work that I'll be able to kind of offer the different learnings and kind of the collation of social media posts, different networks, examples of mutual aid, networks of care, the kind of like literature review I've done on disability and climate change that puts it in conversation with queer and feminist theories. Because like I mentioned, so much of the existing literature is just this very like medical model stuff written by doctors who are really just kind of focusing on not even the people, just focusing on like the disease or the disablement, and just really not even thinking about what it means to holistically involve this really beautiful kind of world building and envisioning new systems that folks are doing. There is, if I want to get on the wonky side of answering your question, there's in the UN policy process, there's a very specific sub portion of the policy called the National Adaptation Plans. And within the National Adaptation Plans, or the NAPs or the NAPAs, each country is committed to putting in how their adaptation in their country will look and feel. And that's where disability tends to show up. It doesn't show up in a lot of country contexts yet. There's a review. I mean, there's 197 countries in this process, and there's less than 40 who mention disability at all. But the ones who do just mention it in terms of vulnerability, right? There's not really concrete pieces. So my hope is that also by being able to share these resources with other disabled and queer and CRIP folks within the different climate spaces, we'll be able to more, I guess, adequately point our decision makers to information that we want them to have access to, not just the kind of peer-reviewed pieces that are put out by these medical journals that then get referred to, because those are the ones that they trust as policymakers. So I'm hoping that's kind of where this might lead, but it'll be up to my comrades as to whether or not they find this work useful and if they want to use it. So we'll see.
Jessica, I just have two things, actually, if that's okay. There are not too many more questions. First, your presentation was so beautiful. Wow, like I definitely rethinking how I would like to do every presentation moving forward. I was really excited by your presentation and really thinking through CRIP and queer theory when thinking about like resilience, or in kind of challenging the frameworks of resilience. I don't know if you've if you've seen a bit of Yarimar Bonilla's work on resilience. So she does something, and I don't know how helpful it would be, because she's not talking about really feminist script or queer theory, but she's doing disaster colonialism and framing like climate resiliency as how we need to contextualize that within longer like neoliberal and colonial histories, and really grounding it with in discussions with like racial capitalism literature. So it might be a kind of way that you guys are both tackling resilience, but you're also extending it in these new directions. So
Sweet. Yeah, I'll look at Yarimar's work. It sounds similar to, have you seen Daniela Rivera's work on disaster colonialism?
I haven't. Oh my gosh.
I'll put it in the chat.
Please do. Please do.
Well, if there
She,
are,
I'm sorry.
oh, go ahead. I was gonna
Oh,
say,
I was,
go ahead. Sorry.
just real quick, Yarimar did like a really interesting like one-on-one discussion with Naomi Klein about like neoliberal capitalism. It was really interesting about centering whiteness. So that would be like it'd be cool if you also include like your discussion to them about what they're also missing. So, exciting stuff.
Sweet, thank you.
Well, if there are no other questions from the audience, it is 5 o'clock, and I do want to be mindful of everyone's time. We will be back tomorrow in RLP starting at 9:30 a.m. for snacks. And I think the first panel starts at 10, but I don't have the schedule in front of me. So 10:15. And it's also a virtual panel, so you could tune in if you like. I'm gonna put the schedule in the chat. But do stop by, because we're gonna have lots of snacks, and we have these beautiful tote bags and wonderful books that both Lonnie and Brenda convinced Haymarket Press to donate to us. So yes. Anything else? Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Have a
Thank
good
you
day.
so much, everyone. Have a
Bye,
great day.
y'all.
Thank you. Bye.